to Classics Confidential, and I'm here in the Greek and Roman galleries of the Fitzwilliam Museum with Dr. Lucilla, who's the Keeper of Antiquities here at the museum, and Dr. Anastasia Christophilopoulou, who is an archaeologist and research assistant here, and as well as the outreach officer. That's right, isn't it? Thanks for agreeing to talk to us. The last time, I've been to the Fitzwilliam Museum before in 2010 to talk to Dr. Kate Cooper when you were redoing the galleries. So I just wondered if we could start off maybe by you taking us back in time and reminding us what happened then when the galleries were redisplayed.
Well, when we redisplayed the gallery, I suppose our main aim was to try and explain to people why this rather disparate collection of objects had ended up in Cambridge. And we decided on a fairly classic, fairly conventional arrangement of the gallery, so it is roughly chronological. But within that chronology, we tried to bring out various themes that would try and explain who made these objects, who used them, who excavated them, who brought them back to Cambridge, and who has interfered with them or intervened with them in one way or another so that they look the way that they do today. So, but we're hoping that these aren't the only sorts of themes that we can focus on in this gallery, because we've got this quite stable arrangement. There are lots of new themes that we also want to experiment with, bringing out some different themes and seeing how they go across with the public. And that's where Anastasia comes in.
Yeah, so tell us about the new project that you're doing on public archaeology. I mean, actually, maybe I could start off by asking you just to tell us what public archaeology is.
Yes, of course. Our project related with public archaeology, or if you want it otherwise, as we name it here, material cultures in public engagement, is again one of the new themes that we are exploring in this gallery in relation with our collections after the redisplay. Now, the reason why we thought of working more in this direction is because we thought that it is time to connect actually public archaeology, which is a practice in a rather theoretical direction in archaeology, mostly practiced within historical associations or organizations of archaeologists who work in the field. But we thought that equally this is something that can be very well presented in a museum context. Because it's not just about, public archaeology is really about explaining to the public archaeological data and also our interpretations of this data. But it's also about giving to the public a glimpse of the experiences and the questions and the challenges that archaeologists and art historians and curators often face when they work with material from the ancient world. And we thought that this is equally engaging, and we actually had a lot of feedback from our visitors and the groups we work with in outreach sessions, asking more about these themes.
So if I understand correctly, the thing that you've chosen for this particular project is to do with the family and domestic life in the ancient world. Why did you choose that topic in particular? What makes it particularly suited to?
It's generally placed within the direction of household archaeology, and as you say, the investigation of family life and the domestic context in antiquity. So among the things we were originally looking at to engage more with the public, we thought that this is something that has great potential. There's a very simple reason for that. When people come into our collections, they are very often interested in the function and the use that these objects that they see had in the past, but they are at the same time very much interested about how people who use them felt, the kind of symbolic associations they had with them, what actually it meant for their own lives. And one way to actually bridge this kind of ancient reality with the modern day reality is to encourage people to think how these objects functioned and meant in their ancient context, and also how they also feel about the material culture they are using in their modern household, in their modern setting. So this is one of the reasons we decided to work on that direction.
So you talk a lot about objects, and so I get the sense that the project is going to be about engagement with specific objects in the collection. Is that right? Can you give us some insight into the kinds of objects that people will be working with? Have you made those choices yet?
Well, we're spoiled for choice really, because we could focus on so many objects and they'd lead us in lots of different directions, but we had a couple of ideas already, and one were the late Bronze Age handmade pots that carry on their bases traces of the imprints of the rush mats that they were put on to dry. And we think those could be quite interesting. They would work with some of our particular interest groups. They're also because they're very evocative of a material that almost never survives from the ancient Greek world, the rush mat, and could lead on to interesting discussions of how that particular material was used and what sorts of furniture it was used for in the home in the late Bronze Age. And then at the other end of the scale we have one of our most iconic objects, which is our so-called Roman Swiss Army knife, which is a real luxury item with all sorts of exciting gadgets for getting snails out of shells and a fork and a knife and all sorts of little spoon and things like that, which is a real upmarket object. And again, that connects very much with, well, firstly it has a connection with people who have a Swiss Army knife today, and secondly it could lead in all sorts of directions into discussions, not just of tableware, but of what people ate and drank in the ancient world. So those are just two examples, but I think we've got plenty that we'll be able to exploit.
Yes. And how will it work in practice? Will you invite specific groups to come into the museum?
Well, look, we are really looking into two different categories of outcomes from this rather small project. The first one is actually, as you say, practical, outreach sessions and ways of engaging with the public. So we actually invited 4 of our more loyal groups with which we have done outreach before in the past 3 years that were particularly interested in this material. And among these are actually disability groups, so people with certain disabilities, particularly people with sight disabilities, as of course it is such a great experience for them to handle and to experience an object if they can't really see it on a display cabinet. And there's also children with specific disabilities, and we also work with a very nice group of immigrant and refugee families who again experience this theme of the archaeology of the house as very intriguing and very interesting, because initially they might have felt that coming into a university museum is rather daunting, because they think that this is a place where you have to have very specialized knowledge in order to understand these ancient cultures that are not related with their own cultural heritage. But we thought of reapproaching them by explaining how certain objects worked in the ancient context, as again they are using particular categories of objects in their own domestic context, and they receive that very well. So there's all these groups and a number of activities that we are implementing with the material we have in hand. And we are also looking into having some research publications out of this project, to various journals such as the Journal for Public Archaeology, which is very relevant to our project, or the museum, the Association of Museums Journal would be very interested in that. And we also acquired a number of interesting international collaborations with people who work, researchers and curators who work in other European museums. Berlin particularly, we have a very good collaboration with some of the museums there, the Antiquasammlung or the Neues Museum. And the Topo Institute, of course, in Berlin is backing this up. And other friends and partners, such as the New Acropolis Museum in Athens, and of course, home partners such as the museums in Oxford or London.
And I wanted to ask if you felt there were any particular challenges of working with family life as a topic, and particularly when you were working with the public. What do you think the big challenges of this project will be?
I think the biggest challenge that we face is exactly to make our audience, make our visitors see that by experiencing an ancient object, you are looking at it both ways. So you are looking at it as something that made sense in the life of very particular people in the past, you know, that had a functional element or you know, an aesthetic element, but also making them see how this object is something that can cross over in time, if you want. So how this relates with, you know, their own feelings about material culture, the way they actually interact with the modern material culture in their house. So I think that's something that, you know, people need to be helped with, because it's not always an association that they make when they visit a museum, any museum, not just a museum that houses a collection related with the ancient world. It can be something else as well. I think that's the biggest challenge. But I think if we achieve that, then we will really have gained a lot in making our visitors, you know, read and experience this collection differently.
Absolutely. And this is quite hard to predict, but do you think people who come here and work with these objects, will they end up feeling closer to people in antiquity, or will you be kind of privileged in a narrative of difference and distance? You know, people are actually very different and they used objects in very different ways than we do.
I think we're approaching it in a broad-minded sort of way, and I think we're really interested in how our visitors react rather than trying to lay down our own academic views, because I think that's an interesting area of research in its own right, as Anastasia was saying.
Yes.
Yes, I think there's both elements of you know, thinking about continuity when you look into ancient material culture and, you know, examples, you know, similar examples from the modern world, and there's also elements of, you know, difference that you might be invited in to think. Let's take one example. If you think about you know, the pottery and the material culture from early you know, houses from the islands of Greece, for example, you know, pre-classical houses, and you are trying to understand how these objects actually related with specific activities, with functions, then you might be very much helped if you think about the modern, you know, modern and traditional setting of islands, and of islands such as Tinos or Andros, where houses are actually in architectural form have not really changed that much in relation with these ancient examples for more than, you know, 2,700 years. And also some of the activities related with these objects are very much the same. So that's one element of, you know, continuity, if you wish. But of course you have to be very careful not to apply, you know, very you know, dangerous analogies between ancient material and modern material. So you have to always keep that in mind. But there are examples that you can draw, you know, analogies from.
No, it will be fascinating to see how all the you know, the different groups that come into the museum with their own ideas and experiences all make, you know, bring very new insights to these objects as well. And what do you hope ultimately that people will take away from this project?
Well, we hope it will encourage people to feel, as Anastasia said, that museums are for them, and that all the objects that we have in here, they can link us in a very immediate way to these very different or similar people of the past, and we hope it will encourage people to explore themselves.
Yes, we also think that it's a very good, it will act as a very good encouragement for us, because some of the ideas and the interpretations that we actually hear from our visitors when they are encouraged to think about these themes are also helping us to see our material differently, and also look at novel ways of displaying it and connecting it with any kind of, you know, sociological questions about ancient life, which is essentially, you know, what a modern museum should be doing. And feedback from, you know, your audience in that sense is extremely important.
Well, that sounds like a really exciting and worthwhile project, and we'll put links, you know, various links to the museum website onto our webpage so that people can come and find out more. But best of luck with it, and we look forward to finding out how it's going.